So the setup is that, and I just want to say, I mean, I think as somebody who is obviously adamantly, like to me, I mean, I single payer is my compromise because I want an NHS, right? Like that's where I am on healthcare. Politically, it was brilliant that they had a unified no, just like several years ago on Social Security privatization. And I think in the present political context, protect Obamacare is paramount. And you talk to any real serious policy people on the left, they'll say this goes in phases. And Republicans, by the way, are still lying about the CBO score and what their bill would do to millions of people's health care. So I just want to always kind of mention Republican sociopathy at the outset. But here is Chuck Schumer. He was on this week with, I think it's Stephanopoulos, over the weekend, talking about where Democrats might go on broader economic issues and then healthcare specifically. We'll play the clip and then take it from there.
Beginning. Week after week, month after month, we're going to roll out specific pieces here that are quite different than the Democratic Party you heard in the past. We were too cautious. We were too namby-pamby. This is sharp, bold, and will appeal to both the old Obama coalition, let's say the young lady who's just getting out of college, and the Democratic voters who deserted us for Trump, the blue-collar worker.
Some may wonder.
Economics, George, is our strength.
Some may wonder if it's going to be
at it.
Bold enough. I mean, even your New York colleague, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, talking about health care, says if you really want to get prices down, you have health care. Will Democrats unify behind single-payer health care?
Well, our economic agenda, we've talked so much about health care that we are not going to address that in this agenda. We've been talking about it, and let me just say, the first thing we're going to do first, I think that this, the Trump care will not pass. It just is rotten.
You think it's dead?
I think it's very unlikely to pass because it's rotten to the core. People are not for reducing taxes on rich people or getting rid of Medicaid, which is a very, very middle class now thing, as well as for poor people. So the first things we're going to propose, if the Republicans hopefully will join us once they abandon this rotten bill, is some cost sharing, which the insurance companies say will help bring down premiums and stabilize the market. Something else that Republicans have often supported, which is reinsurance, proposed by Tom Carper and Tim Kaine. And Claire McCaskill's proposed something in the Bexar counties, B-A-R-E. If you can't get insurance in those counties, you can get the same kind of health insurance we get. Then we're going to look at broader things. Single payer is one of them.
So that is on the table?
Medicare, well, sure, many things are on the table. Medicare for people above 55 is on the table. A buy-in to Medicare is on the table. Buy-in to Medicaid is on the table. On the broader issues, we will start examining them once we stabilize the system.
Ben.
Yes. Is he still talking?
Yeah, Jesus, he really does, doesn't he? I mean, he's one of those guys that even if it's 50 seconds, it feels like an eternity.
Yeah, it feels long, right?
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So, look, here's what's not on the table, single payer. That's what I take away from that.
Mm-hmm.
But sure, it's on the table, sure. That's what he says.
Right.
So what I'm curious about is what happens, because as always, I suspect that the mainstream of the Democratic Party, the establishment of the Democratic Party, doesn't appreciate the ferocity of the belief or interest of progressives.
Right.
So I'm just curious how they're going to react when that type of approach to healthcare, the middling approach to healthcare, is received poorly, and my hunch is it will be. I don't fault them for it. It's still progress. It's still better. And ultimately, when and if this country gets to single payer, it'll be a process. That was the process that began with Obamacare. That's what I and millions of other people thought then, and that's sort of still what I think.
Mm-hmm.
However, this sort of, first of all, any leader who uses the phrase namby-pamby within the first 6 seconds of his explanation about healthcare is not likely to appeal to the progressive movement. That's my sense.
Right. Right.
So I just think it's very, very tepid, and I'm curious how they'll react, because it could be rather. I think I don't think they are appreciating, again, the ferocity of that movement, and I wonder whether they'll react to it. We saw in 2016 that they're. That the establishment, whoever represents it, is slow to react to it, and I'm totally curious whether they'll be quicker.
Do you think that there's also just a problem, thinking of how to articulate this, but I think that there's the kind of, there's the for lack of a better term, and I don't necessarily accept these terms, but there's the left versus center argument inside the Democratic Party, or progressives versus center right, whatever. But then there's also just like what time you're living in or not living in. And
right.
It also strikes me that, there's that when you are when you're dealing with a Republican opposition that is basically with a Republican governing party that basically doesn't even take the rule of law seriously and has completely laid out an agenda which is, ruthless and amoral and purely just a redistribution scheme for top-end earners. That's all it is. But it's actually quite cohesive, right? Like the reason you got to destroy Obamacare is because you want permanent structural tax giveaways. The reason you want to, rejigger the courts is so it can destroy labor unions, which frees up more money. Like it works in a grid. And it seems to me that it's not just that these kind of, the center proposals, some of them could be perfectly nice and nice little incremental improvements. Some of them might actually be, bad ideas. I don't really know. But it's like you're responding to mafia war with PowerPoints still. So that there's this way in which it's not just the progressives are right on the merits. It's also like you're still not matching in the intensity or in the cohesiveness.
Look, this is yes, that's true, and part of that is not having an over. He thinks that what he just recounted there, is some form of a bold new plan. We're certain that it isn't a bold new plan. We don't have bold new plans. We have become a party over the last 40 years since the shock. That would be my dog, Bob, who has a couple things to say about this, too.
Yeah, Bob is very adamant about, he wants Bernie to re-up for 2020. I've talked with Bob about it.
Bob does not think 79 is too old to be president of the United States. For crying out loud, Bob is 164 years old right now in human years. So
yes, and he'll still compete with younger dogs on any number of metrics.
So this is become, and I don't say this as derisively as many do. This is a party of incrementalism. That's what it's become in sort of this 40 years of the still post-McGovern loss shock, right? Mm-hmm. Man, we cannot talk that way. We cannot be that boldly aggressive, right? And so, but there is a very big, very active and very aware movement that I don't think they are still fully appreciating. Clearly, Hillary Clinton didn't fully appreciate her whole team, and I don't think that Chuck Schumer does either. But think about how 4 years ago, 8 years ago, 12 years ago, George Stephanopoulos wasn't asking a single payer on the table, right? Chuck Schumer didn't think he had to give a pretend nod to single payer. Certainly not with this kind of regularity.
Right.
Kamala Harris, who is clearly the darling right now of the establishment class, and that doesn't mean she would be a horrific pick, but she doesn't have a track record which progressives can object to, as big a track record as, say, Cory Booker does right now.
There's some objections to her, but yeah, she's not Cory Booker level. That's right. Right.
But she has while there are some objections to her, it'd be easier for her to repair those objections, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's not baked in like it is with.
Well,
sure
Cory Booker is made for 2005 and has never updated himself, and that's his problem.
Totally, we talked about that. But all these guys, if they have some political acumen, could shift that narrative, right? Mm-hmm. So far, I'm seeing not a great sign that Cory Booker wants to, but Harris's is so narrowly written that she could. Mm-hmm. But she said, I think last week, I'm completely as a concept, I'm completely in support of single payer, but we've got to work out the details, and the details matter on that, which means in 12 years, right? So to me, that's what that meant.
Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos?